The second thing it does is it says that we are not, as a matter of state policy, going to avail ourselves of the option under the Affordable Care Act to expand the Medicaid population to 138% of federal poverty. My understanding is that would take our Medicaid population from roughly 1.1 million, as it currently is, to about 1.7 million. And again, these are rough numbers. I may be off by tens of thousands, but that's a rough approximation of the kind of expansion that we would see in regard to the Medicaid pool if the Affordable Care Act authorization was exercised by the state. Now, on this side of the aisle, my friends raised the question, why would we not expand that Medicaid population? For the first 3 years, the federal government is going to pay for 100% of the cost of all those individuals that come on to the Medicaid rolls. It's not going to cost the state a penny. So why wouldn't you do it? And even after that, it's going to go to 90% as to that additional population by the federal government and 10% by the state. And after that, who knows? Well, it's the who knows that has me concerned. And let me tell you why. First of all, there is $17 trillion worth of debt and growing in Washington, D.C. I see absolutely no resolve on either the part of Republicans or Democrats in Washington, D.C. to do anything about curtailing that national debt at any time in the foreseeable future. Moreover, what I see are annual deficits that up until last year were approximately $1 trillion a year. Now, I think they've been whittled down now to about $700 or $600 million a year. But it's indisputable that that debt is growing very quickly. But what really concerns me about that debt and what really makes me look at this Medicaid expansion with a very, very suspicious eye is the way the federal government is going about keeping its doors open. I mean, none of us could end up spending more than we take in for very long without there being foreclosures or evictions or your family starving. So you have to ask yourself, how is it that Washington, D.C. is able to do it? Well, I guess one answer to the question is they borrow the money, and that's true. The United States Treasury on a weekly basis goes out and sells Treasury securities. Primary dealers, foreign governments, other entities buy these Treasury securities, which is essentially a loan to the federal government. And those dollars are then used to prop up that deficit and allow the federal government to keep the doors open. Okay, so we're borrowing our way. We're digging a deeper and deeper hole. But the concern and the worry is actually far greater than that, because what happens in regard to about 75 to 80% of those T security purchases on that weekly basis are by so-called primary dealers like J.P. Morgan or Goldman Sachs. And what they do is they go out and they buy those Treasury securities knowing that they can turn around very shortly and sell it at a profit to the Federal Reserve that will create more money to buy those securities and expand its balance sheet. We've seen the Federal Reserve's balance sheet quadruple in the last 5 years. We've seen the monetary base in this country quadruple in the last 5 years. The inventory of assets that they have on their balance sheet are basically T-notes or securities that have almost zero interest. What's going to happen when interest rates rise, as it's already predicted they're going to be? They're not going to be able to unload those. No one's going to buy those unless they steeply discount. And then we're really in a hurry. Then we're really in a difficulty, because all of a sudden things start to snowball and the financial predicament becomes more and more dire. And at some point in time, even the United States Congress isn't going to be able to simply paper over this by raising the debt ceiling and have to take some action. And I submit to you the very first thing they will do, aside from raising taxes, they'll try to do that first. But the second thing they'll do is they're going to stop the amount of money, the transfer payments that go from Washington, D.C. back down to the states for roads and health care and Title I education and other federal programs. We'll still send money up there as taxpayers for Washington, D.C., but less and less are there going to be transfer payments coming back down to the states to cover those programs to the extent we have in the past. So that's why I have a very substantial concern in regard to expanding our Medicaid population from 1.1 million to 1.7 million, because I fear, and I think reasonably so, that in a few years' time, that federal spigot's going to turn off or at least slow down. And Senator from Finance, you're going to have to go ahead and with loaves and fishes, figure out how you're going to cover Medicaid expenses at that point in time, because there's not going to be the same amount of money coming down from the Washington, D.C. You'll have more people in Medicaid. You'll have 1.7 million people in there, but you won't have nearly the amount of money from Washington, D.C. coming down to provide health care services or insurance. So That's why HHS Director Tony Keck thinks it's a bad idea to avail ourselves of the expansion of Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. That's why the governor thinks it's a bad idea. That's why this body last year, both the House and the Senate, decided it was a bad idea to expand Medicaid. And I would submit to you that our financial predicament up in Washington, D.C. hasn't improved since last year. In fact, it's gotten worse. And so there's even more reason to not accept that expansion. So the second part of this amendment states that we will not avail ourselves as a matter of state policy to expanding that Medicaid population as authorized by the Affordable Care Act.